Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. This is Eric Morin. I'm glad to have you back. Hope you've had a great week. I hope you enjoyed the last podcast. One of the things I want to talk about is a social media quote that I put out, or a statement I put out last week, which was this idea of growth versus cash. I started thinking about it for a second. All we ever hear about is growth, growth, growth. And matter of fact, we just had a doctor who was saying the other day, he said, I'm every time I hear some kind of a consulting person, all they're talking about is growth, growth, growth. And sometimes that's not always what we care about. And I would agree 100%. And I think one of the things you got to think about in your business is this idea. And I will tell you, after working with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doctors, that when somebody first comes to me, one of the biggest problems, and when I say most, 95%, and you're listening to this right now, if you're a doctor, I guarantee you 95% of you are struggling with cash in some way. And that's not uncommon, just to let you know, for businesses to struggle with cash. A few months back, Elon Musk, who's the CEO of Tesla, wrote down that Tesla was a few weeks away. I mean, he did this article or an interview where he said Tesla, and this is a multi-billion-dollar company, was weeks away from being insolvent, weeks away from just not being able to pay their bills. And recently, they even had layoffs. So this idea that as soon as I get big, as soon as I grow this business, then all these cash problems go away. It's kind of a fallacy. And we assume that, though, don't we? We assume that if I can just grow this business, then I'll save more, then I'll accumulate more, then I'll give more, then I'll have more. And so we're chasing this horizon, we're changing this ever-moving target, hoping that that's the day that the stress goes away. Now, I can tell you that there is some truth to that if it's managed well. But the thing to understand about businesses is businesses eat cash. The more you grow, the more you spend. And so what happens is the great practices set a cash goal. They know how much should be set aside. I mean, in the minimum of the operating account, in a minimum, there should be a month and a half of expenses sitting there. But that's just the operating account. See, we need to have reserves. We need to understand that there needs to be reinvestment, for instance, back into the practice. One of the mistakes that independent dentists make often is they don't spend enough money in marketing. They don't have the ability to grow their marketing side. They don't have the ability to go hire the new person. And then what they do, because there's no money, is they turn around and they take out these loans, and they're short-term amortization loans. And I want to kind of just talk about that for a second. So equipment loans are like car loans. They're really easy to get, all right? You can walk into almost any car dealership and pretty much go get a loan tomorrow. Even if you've got a 520 credit score, you can go get a car. And the problem is they're under a short amortization schedule, which means that if you start adding equipment loans that are amortized over 5 years, I mean, just the payment schedule is over 5 years, then that piece of equipment sucks the cash out of the practice. And every time you do that, and when you're not calculating your return on investment, if you're not actually looking at the return on investment, so every time you go and get one of those equipment loans because you haven't put the money aside, then what ends up happening is it starts to strangle your cash flow. And I've had practices walk in my door with 20 loans on their cash, on their books, these short-term notes, and they go buy the CEREC machines, and they go buy the lasers, and they buy the scanners, and they buy everything that pops up, never thinking about the return on investment of those things. We don't buy things unless they have an ROI, right? We want to always measure your return on investment, which is just such an important thing to do, but that's a topic for another day. But I want you to think about this. So are you going to need to buy equipment? The answer is of course. Are you going to want some new technology? Well, the answer is of course. But you have to be putting money aside along the way. So when those opportunities come, you're not having to take out debt. Now, there's some tax advantages of that as well. And we can talk about that later, but I will tell you that you want to be putting money aside, not just, and by the way, most accounting firms in the dental space aren't even accounting in a way that leaves you cash. If you think about it, the way that when we look at cash, profit should be the last thing that's taken out of a dental practice. Let me say that again. Profit should be the last thing that's taken out of a dental practice. And that's after all your reserve needs are met and debt needs are met. And you've done all the things you need to in a dental practice. But yet, what happens is we don't have the cash. We don't have the cash for reinvestment. So we don't reinvest back in our practice. And one of the reasons we don't reinvest, which would create more growth and more cash, is because people tell it it's an expense and it's actually a return. So we buy things. My point is we're buying things that don't have a return. We're financing them over a long period of time. And then the things that do have a significant return, we don't invest in. And so then we're left in a poor cash position. When you buy things that have a low return on investment and forego the things that have a high return on investment, right? This is like business 101. You end up in a poor cash position. So what I would tell you need to do is you need to look at your purchases first of all before you buy them and calculate your return on investment. One of the things I help clients with is truly understanding how to look at return on investment before you start buying things. Very, very important to do. I had a young lady come to me one time and she said she wanted to buy a piece of equipment. She was at a large dental conference and they did the numbers for her, which by the way did not include her overhead, which were severely wrong. But we went through those together. We looked at them and I said, okay, you need to do 5 of these procedures every month for the next 7 years to break even. And she goes, I don't want to do that many. I was like, well, then we don't buy the piece of equipment. That's how we got to make business decisions. Now, it's interesting when we start spending money in a business, we start to feel okay with it because we start to feel like, well, it's a business expense. But understand, you've got to have cash sitting there because one of the things that also happens is opportunity. Yes, there are people that go out and they look, spend maybe a year or two, they try to find a lot, they build the building. Yes, that happens. But I will tell you, oftentimes somebody comes to me with, hey, I found a practice that's open and available. Hey, I found this building that's open and available. Hey, I found this lot. And you want to be what I'd say bank ready. Write that down. You want to be bank ready. So what ends up happening is you want to have the ability to walk into a bank, right? So here in Atlanta area, we've got a great dental bank, Affinity Bank, and you could go to them, right? And say, hey, look, here's what my financial situation looks like. And by the way, they care about your narrative, right? These companies, these banks care about your narrative. So they're going to look at your cash position. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to look at your cash position and they're going to look and kind of paint themselves a story. How well are you at managing cash? If you've got 40 pieces of debt on your personal life and your business, how does that look? Not very good, right? And so I will tell you is you want to be managing cash, right? You want to be liquid. You want to have the ability to go buy things when you want to. So I would tell you, just as a rule of thumb, I talked to him about 2 podcasts ago about, at least putting 10% aside. It's probably a good rule of thumb to take at least 10% of what's coming into your cash and put that aside. Why? Because one of the things you want is reserves. You need the ability to take cash and go buy things. You can grow and grow and grow and grow if you want to. Okay. But I'm going to tell you, I had a guy years ago, had a $5 million dental practice, came and saw me. He had a $5 million dental practice. And you know what he had in cash? $7,000. Now, I want you to think about what the payroll is on a $5 million dental practice. Think about the payroll, right? Astounding. So what I'm telling you is just because you grow does not mean you're going to have cash. So you've got to become really, really good at managing cash. You've got to be really, really good at putting money aside. And you want to be able to create discipline around that. Get it out of your hands. If you've got to take it and put it in a different account, So taking your reserves and putting it into another institution with no debit card and no check writing ability just so you won't touch it, go do it. Go put it in a money market, making a few points. Do what you have to do to get the money out of your hands, because here's the truth, you will spend it. So I would encourage you in 2019 is don't just have a growth goal. Don't sit back and just say, hey, I'm going to make this much growth. It's so interesting this time of year. If someone does $1 million, they go, hey, this year I'm going to do 1.2 million. Look, it's not enough just to do 1.2 million, because what you'll find is you'll get 1.2 million. You go, oh my gosh, we did all that extra work. We didn't really make that much more money. And then all of a sudden you go to 1.5 million and you'll do the same thing. And then at 2 million, you'll do the same thing. And don't think that's, managing cash, by the way, is not just for the independent dentist. I just heard a story about a DSO that took on $5 million of capital and went through that capital in a period of like 32 days. Managing cash is it's instrumental to creating a great financial business. It's just, you have to do it if you're going to become a great business owner. You want to become a great business owner? I think it was back in 2011, Krispy Kreme donuts grew their way into bankruptcy. Believe it or not, it sounds like a crazy statement, but you can grow your way into bankruptcy. When I was in business school years ago, one of the things they said is that, cash flow keeps the lights on. I'll always remember that. Cash flow keeps the lights on. It's not about profitability. Profitability doesn't keep the lights on. Cash flow. So what you want to do as a business owner, because it doesn't matter how big you get. If you don't have cash, you will be stressed out. You can be a $10 million practice. If you have no cash, you'll be stressed out. I promise you, Elon Musk, when he was talking about the fact that Tesla was 3 weeks away from bankruptcy, was stressed out. Matter of fact, I don't know if you remember the news coverage on Elon Musk about 6 months ago wasn't very good. He was doing some kind of radical things. Well, he's probably stressed out. Create cash in your life. It'll make a significant impact on your stress level, your ability to impact, because the problem with growth, and not that I'm against growth, by the way, of course I want to grow an institution. There's scalability, it's increase in net worth. There's a lot of reasons why we grow a business. My point is not saying don't grow. My point is to say grow, but grow profitably and grow with the right cash, right, in the bank. And also you want the ability to impact when you, one of the things I talked about last week was this ability to take cash and impact other people. You want to be able to impact your team, right? Have the ability to look at them and be able to help them move the needle by having the cash to affect your team and affect your community and affect those around you. So what do they say? Cash is king. So here's what I want you to do in 2019. As you're listening to this, you can't just be motivated. You can't just hear something good. You've got to take action. If you just, motivation doesn't get you far. You've got to have a plan. So here's what I would say. I would say, look at it now and say, okay, where's my cash position right now? How do I feel about that? And then what I would go back and say is, okay, now I have this cash position. By the way, we don't want to sit on too much cash. There's a whole nother podcast I can do on that, because there's a whole loss of investment return on that, but that's another conversation for another day. But I want you to think about the cash that you have and say, okay, what would I feel good at the end of 2019? What would I need to feel great? At the end of 2019, if I was looking at my books, what's the number that I would need to be at? And then what you do is you create a strategic plan for your business around that. And instead of you just throwing out some arbitrary growth goal, you go, listen, because some of you, by the way, listening to this might have done $1 million last year, and you could do $1 million this year, but if you had more cash, you'd feel better. And so what I would tell you is I think growth goals are good, and I'm not saying to get rid of those goals, but what we want to make sure is, because if you're just spending every bit of extra cash you get, you'll just be stressed out and you'll wondering why you're working so hard. So put some money aside for your cash this year. Put a cash goal aside. Open an account. Get it out of your business if you need to. Have the availability to get to it. If you do once a week, maybe once a month, just transfer cash. Know how much cash you need to have in your main operating account. for those types of day-to-day expenses. And if anything goes above that, don't take it home. Don't go buy a new car. Don't go buy a new house, because it's just going to stress you out. Take that money and move it out. Move it somewhere. Take it, get it out of your hands if you know you're going to spend it. And by the way, there's a lot of you listening to this that know. Come on, I know it's you. It's okay. You can say, yeah, that is me. I am talking to you. Take the money, go create an account somewhere else, another institution. Move the money out of your hands. Let it accumulate. Find out what you're trying to buy. If it's a building, if it's a lot, if it's some investment in the future, if it's a marketing campaign, move the money somewhere you have access to it and you can get to it. Very, very important. So look, I thank you for tuning in today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe. We've got a lot more to talk about, and I want to be able to give you that information, and we'll get more and more in depth on some of these concepts. So hit subscribe. Appreciate you listening today. You guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.